My name is Emily. I am 34 years old and have been married to my husband Daniel for 7 years. From the outside, our life seems absolutely perfect. Daniel is a successful lawyer and I'm a free-spirited woman who runs my own small business. We live in a peaceful suburb just outside New York City. We have a big house, nice cars and friends who think everything is fine. But behind every seemingly perfect thing there is a crack. My marriage to Daniel had become monotonous over the last few years. At first everything was perfect, we were traveling together, having adventures, but over time the passion between us waned. He became buried in his work and I started to feel lonely. I know he still loves me, but his touch no longer had the same excitement. And then, one evening, Daniel made a proposal that surprised me. We were drinking wine together when he turned to me and said, "You know what, Emily? Maybe it's time we spiced up our lives a bit," he said. I raised my eyebrows. "What do you mean?" There was a strange twinkle in his eyes. "There's something I've been thinking about for a while. But it might make you uncomfortable." I felt a shiver run through me. "Tell me," I said. He looked at me carefully and hesitated for a moment. Then, choosing his words carefully, he said, "Do you remember Ryan? He was one of my best friends in college. I reconnected with him last week and I think I'd like him to know you." I looked at him puzzled. "Why?" He smiled. "I just think you'd get along well, and maybe it's time to have some fun." The words echoed in my mind. Something fun. I knew exactly what that meant, but I found it hard to believe that such a thing could actually be suggested. Daniel was not like that, or so I thought. I felt both fear and a strange curiosity. This conversation was the first step that would change something in my life. And I didn't yet know exactly what I was being drawn into. 4 days after Daniel's suggestion, Ryan was the only thing on my mind. I didn't know him at all, but I was both surprised and unsettled by how relaxed Daniel was about it. Did he really want this? Or was he just testing me? But my curiosity got the better of everything. Daniel invited Ryan over one Friday night. I'd been checking myself in the mirror all day, leaving my hair wavy, wearing an elegant dress that vaguely revealed my curves. I'd tried too hard, and I was ashamed of myself when I realized it. But still, when I looked in the mirror, I felt an excitement I couldn't define. My heart raced when the doorbell rang. Daniel opened the door and Ryan walked in. The moment I saw him, things changed. Ryan was completely different from Daniel. More relaxed, more confident, maybe a little more rebellious. He had auburn hair cut short, his eyes were dark blue and he had a look that seemed to read everything. When she smiled, I felt a strange stirring inside me. "Emily, we finally meet," he said, shaking my hand. His handshake was strong but gentle. Daniel was enjoying the moment. "I hope you'll get along well," he said with a smile. I thought to myself, what if we get along too well? But I didn't say anything. Throughout the evening we ate and drank wine and chatted. Ryan was charming, funny, and he had charmed me without me realizing it. But the main thing was Daniel's behavior. At one point, he took my hand and turned to Ryan. "Emily's been wanting some excitement in her life for a long time," he said, smiling slightly. At that moment I froze. Ryan looked at me with a slight tilt of his head. "Yeah." My breathing became tight. I didn't answer, but the slight blush on my face gave away the storm raging inside me. This was the beginning. The doors of a forbidden game had been opened. And I didn't know yet whether I would step inside or not. The way Ryan looked into my eyes melted the last shreds of resistance in me. Daniel, on the other hand, leaned back comfortably, almost as if he was watching the process unfold. The moral conflict inside me, the battle between my mind and my body, was completely silenced for a moment. A while ago, I would have vehemently opposed the idea, but now, Ryan's presence was igniting something in me that I had forgotten for years. When Daniel went into the kitchen for a moment, Ryan leaned in slightly and asked in a low voice, "Are you really comfortable here?" I didn't know why he asked that, but I shook my head on impulse. "I don't know," I said honestly. He smiled. "I think you know." In that moment, I realized how close Ryan's hands were to mine, and when our eyes met, I felt like I was out of control of my body. When Daniel came back, our gazes immediately separated, but something had changed inside. As the hours ticked by, the fear inside me was completely replaced by excitement. I didn't know what Daniel was thinking, but he didn't seem to care. It was as if he had planned everything, as if he had accepted everything in advance. Finally, as the night wore on and it got darker, Daniel turned slightly to Ryan. "Emily is ready now," he said. At that moment, my whole body froze. Ryan looked at me, smiled, but there was a hesitation in him. "Is this something you really want?" he whispered. I held my breath. I knew I had to answer, but I didn't know what to say. Finally, I took a step. And from that moment on, there was no turning back. Ryan's voice was low and reassuring, but there was a slight uneasiness in it. Did I really want this? Did we really want this? But in that moment, logic no longer mattered. Ryan's fingertips left an electric sensation on my skin as he ran them over my hand. The weight of the moment settled on us. The air in the room grew warmer, thicker. Daniel was still there, watching us. But it was as if a curtain had fallen in my mind. It was just me and Ryan in the world. Ryan's hand slowly slid up my wrist, caressing my arm, reaching my shoulder. I took a deep breath, my body sensitive to the slightest touch. Daniel got up and poured another glass of wine. There was a faint smile on his lips. "Go ahead," he said calmly. At that moment, something inside me completely snapped. Ryan moved his body closer to mine. I felt a shiver run through me as his breath hit my skin. He placed his hands gently on my waist and looked at my face more carefully. "Are you sure?" he whispered. I couldn't answer, but my body was already talking. My fingers involuntarily squeezed the sleeve of his shirt. His warmth, his scent, his touch. A feeling that had been forgotten for years was now storming through me. My body flinched when Ryan lowered his head and lightly touched his lips to my neck. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. Daniel didn't say anything, he just watched. As Ryan's hands continued to explore my body, my heart was beating so fast that I felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I gasped for breath, my thoughts scattered. This was madness. But I didn't want to stop. Ryan's hands slid from my waist to my back and our eyes met again, a silent agreement. We belonged to each other completely now. And that night, the rest of my life changed forever. Ryan's touch was light at first. Like a stranger's touch, uneasy, exploring. But my body was no stranger to him. It was a reunion that had been years in the making. Daniel was silent. No comment. No reaction. But there was a strange satisfaction in his eyes. He had brought us together and now he was just watching what was about to happen. Ryan's fingers ran lightly over my hand. It was a small gesture, but the effect was huge. My heart raced, I took a deep breath, and his breathing became ragged. He leaned in slowly, his face close to mine. Before our lips touched, he paused for a moment and looked into my eyes. There was a question in that look. "Do you really want it?" I didn't know the answer, but my body did. I placed my hands softly on his chest, feeling his heart beating, his as fast as mine. And then, without hesitation, Ryan pressed his lips to mine. Slowly at first, then more greedily. A warmth filled my whole body. I even felt the breath that slipped in between his lips, and the slightest touch of his tongue sent a spark through me. When he wrapped his hands around my waist, my body moved closer to his. His fingertips roamed over my skin, slowly taking me over with every touch. An involuntary gasp escaped me as his touch caressed my shoulders and traveled down my back. Ryan's touch was awakening something in me that Daniel hadn't made me feel in years. I pulled my head back slightly and looked at him, taking deep breaths, and he smiled and said, "I can read everything you're thinking right now in your face." I didn't know what I was thinking, but my body still wanted his touch. Ryan leaned down to my neck. I closed my eyes as his warm breath hit my skin, and I didn't try to suppress the feeling that rippled through me when his lips touched mine. He left little kisses, each one going further and further. My hands clutched his shoulder involuntarily. This whole moment was like a dream where time stood still. I had already forgotten that Daniel was still there. As Ryan's hands slowly slid to my hips, I opened my eyes and looked up at him, a faint smile on his lips. "Aren't you going to stop me?" he whispered. I didn't answer, because I didn't want to stop him anymore. And in that moment, all the inhibitions inside me were completely broken.